What is going on, everybody? It's that time of the week again. Welcome to week five's edition of our picks. Rohde, the showdown master, and he's been doing pretty well so far this NFL year. Actually had a good week last week, thanks to the Cordarrelle Patterson coming through big time for me. But I'm ready to get after it and improve a little bit this week. I didn't get my enough. I had a little too much Devontae Adams. Sheets can probably relate to me because he may have won $1 million if he didn't have. He could have literally used any other receiver in the same price range. But anyway, we're on to a new week, and I think what we'll do is we'll start off with our favorite games to target. Then we'll go positions, which are going to overlap with some of the games we're targeting. Obviously, that's how we do it. I'm just going to say again what Rohde's going to probably say a bunch of times. Make sure you get your secondary stacks logical and make sure that you have them paired up rather than just randomly firing a bunch of guys into a lineup and hoping it works. Rohde, any sort of overall thoughts on this slate before we get into our favorite games to start with?
Well, this is going to be a spread out slate, I think, a little bit more, just because I think some of the bigger games are on the slate. Like, we got a really nice game tonight, the Seahawks. We got a big showdown game. The Chiefs are like, Sunday night, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple bigger games where I've been targeting a lot of those teams, Seahawks, Rams and Chiefs a lot lately. So we don't have those teams. So we're going to have to figure out where we're going to go this week, I think. And everybody's going to have to figure that out.
Yeah, and what usually happens when it looks like it's going to be spread out, I think people tend to sort of condense onto a certain spot. You know what I mean? And I think that's going to end up being like by default the Giants and Dallas. And I'll just say, like, historically, those teams tend to play pretty low scoring, close games. And the Dallas defense might be a little better than everyone gives them credit for based on who they've gone up against so far. So I like that game. That's one of them for me. But I don't want to be overexposed to the one chalky spot on the slate that I feel like is appropriately spread out. The other one is we're going to get Trey Lance. So Arizona, San Francisco. I think Trey Lance is going to be popular, but I don't think the Arizona side with Kyler or any of the receivers at all are going to be owned. So I like that game quite a bit. I really like the Packers and Bengals. I want to get your thoughts more on that. We'll jump into that in a second because I really like that game. I like all of the other pieces in the Tennessee Texans game. The problem I have with that one is I don't know that I want to use. I don't really want to use either quarterback. I'm open to the idea of potentially using Trevor Lawrence, but I do think that if we get value again from the Tennessee receivers, we still won't know till tomorrow. We're recording this on Thursday. I will probably take some shots on those guys, even though it doesn't. They do have 4 guys who it could be. I just think those cheap receivers in a game that could be, I think, a lot faster paced than people think is interesting, and I really like the receivers on the Jacksonville side. And then the last one is the game I'm going to, and that is Cleveland and the Chargers. It's a little bit, lower total, but I like the prices, especially like Keenan Allen's price stands out to me. I'm just a huge Herbert guy in general, and I think that I'm going to just continue playing him and riding it. Like, I think that you're getting like another version of like a Dak type of play when you play Herbert at much lower ownership. And everywhere through that whole game, I think is interesting. So those are my 5 games. How about you? Do you have anything different that you're doing? And what do you think about the Packers Bengals? Because I'm sort of leaning that might end up becoming by the end of this one of my top, maybe potentially. I mean, you're going to get a lot of ownership on Devontae Adams and Jamar Chase, but I mean, Adams, Boyd, Mixon in that game is going to have somewhere in the low teens probably ownership. I don't think I'd go to Aaron Jones, but I'm open to it. I just think that's an interesting game. So what do you think about that game? And then take us into your favorite games.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you literally said everything that I like, really. That Green Bay Packers game, I think, is getting a little bit of hype. I've heard a little bit of people talking about it, so it might gain some ownership because Adams is going to be pretty chalky. I think Mixon might be out, right? Or like he's questionable.
It's possible. But we just have to wait till tomorrow. But I have him as
so we don't know. I don't even think projections have him in right now. So I mean, he could be if he does make it in. He could be a guy where he's getting less ownership because people don't know. We could go that way, like an Adams Mixon stack, which I wouldn't mind, but don't take that because Mixon's probably going to be out.
Right.
I do like the Chargers game, like you talked about a lot. I have a really awesome Chargers best ball stack going right now. Like, I'm just blowing it out of the water. I got like McLaurin and all these Cup in that line, all these other guys just with that stack and that best ball team. It's just smashing, but I've been really high on the Chargers. Eckler's been really good. So yeah, a lot of those teams I like. I think Arizona Murray, you're going to get him lower owned. I think Lance is going to get a lot because he's like 5.7 on DK.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like Murray. I've been playing him a lot this year. I've been playing a lot of Herbert this year. I had some Rodgers stacks. I think those are the stacks I'm going to go back to again this week.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, one thing is like DeAndre Hopkins is, because of a couple tough matchups and an injury, has sort of faded out of people's minds. And you're going to get no ownership on DeAndre Hopkins. Probably everybody wants to play, and rightfully so. And maybe we can even find a way to do that, to play both he and Devontae. But I think that if you talk about just like a super low-owned DeAndre Hopkins in a big game against a division rival and everything, he can find ways to get open. You even saw it even in a tough matchup last week he still had 7 targets against LA. They didn't really need him because the way they were running the ball. But I think you would have seen a lot more of him had it been a different game script. And I really like the Arizona side. So I agree with you there. And taking it into quarterbacks, I think like they're both, like you said, Trey Lance is going to get a lot of ownership, probably going to be the highest owned quarterback. And in that same game, I'm very happy to try and pay a little bit more and take the other side of it. But right now, the quarterbacks I've got the most of are Herbert, Dak, as we mentioned, Murray, Aaron Rodgers, and those are my main guys. I didn't mention one. I don't know about the whole game, but I think it's really weird that Minnesota's got a nearly 30 total against a pretty bad Detroit team, and no one wants to play the stud receivers, both of them, especially Jefferson for me. And then at the same time, Dalvin Cook, because he's questioned, he didn't get much work last week with coming off the injury, and he's going to have really low ownership as well. And I love the idea of running it back with Hawkinson on the other side. Potentially DeAndre Swift, who will probably be the only player with ownership, but I think you could put a big stack in that game, play Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift, and then run it back. On the other side, you play Jefferson or Thielen and potentially Cook. Maybe not all in the same lineup, but I really like that spot a little bit as well. And I just think that's not getting the ownership it should.
Yeah, that was my sleeper game you took from me right there.
Damn, sorry about that.
I was holding out on that one. No, I really like Jefferson. Guys, on the Minnesota side, they're getting a lot of targets, right? It's like Jefferson and Thielen's getting all the work. You got Conklin, the tight end's getting a lot of the work. And who am I missing?
You got Jefferson, Thielen. That's pretty much, and Cook.
Osborne, right? Was it Osborne?
Osborne, yeah.
Osborne. He's getting some work, right? He's been getting some.
Yeah, he had 7 targets last week. He had the big game week 2 against Arizona.
So it's really condensed, like guys, like that target share is like just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're stacking that game, take Kirk Cousins with like 2 of those 4 in your stack. Like build a group. You can build a group right there in the player group. Mm-hmm. And have Kirk Cousins and make sure you get 1 of or 2 of the 4 guys we just talked about. That's how you build a stack for that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really good.
I agree. I don't even know. I even like the Cousins thing, but I think that, again, Dalvin Cook, I'm just going to keep going back to it. It's going to be hard to justify playing him over Henry and all that stuff. And Henry, I expect to have a monster week and all this stuff. But I mean, 8,400 against Detroit, this would have been a thing where he'd be sharing ownership if not for last week and the injury before, right? And there's no reason why Dalvin Cook couldn't go back to 25 carries, 150 yards, rushing 2 or 3 touchdowns. Like that's totally on the table here too.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to have to play both sides. I don't know. He's coming in at 6% ownership. What is he coming in at right now?
Yeah, somewhere around there. That's what I've got him at right now is 6%.
Man, that guy could go nuclear.
Yeah, I mean that could be the play of the week. I love that.
Could be the play of the week, guys. Yeah, right there.
Absolutely. So any quarterbacks who you mentioned the Cousins just now, any quarterbacks that maybe I haven't talked about, I am not going to be using as much. I'm open to Daniel Jones, but I'm still a little bit skeptical. I'm open to Tom Brady. But again, I'm probably not going to do it. I'm just saying, I'm just like, he crossed my mind. I'm not going to do it. Certainly as having some ownership. I prefer the other guys around him more. I'm not getting to the Philly Carolina side as much. But I do think that that's another weird game that could go. But I think mostly it's going to be, the guys I mentioned already. Is there any other quarterbacks for you that we didn't talk about?
No, but I definitely, like when my first statement of the slate was, it's going to be spread out. And you can see that the pricing is just kind of all over the place a little bit. But like, I feel like a lot of these guys people can go to. I really think it's going to spread out. I know there's some games people are targeting. But I mean, you could even make a case if you wanted to for like Sam Darnold. A lot of people should go back to that game. He's had, good usage, but he's scoring a lot of rushing touchdowns, which has been absolutely insane.
Yep.
But like, I mean, even like, you got the Fields is starting, he's against the Raiders now. Is that game shootout? Raiders were scoring a lot of points. Then you got like Trevor Lawrence, they were playing super fast. I know you talked about that Tennessee game. on that side of it. But if, you know, like last week, I showed in a video I did, guys, on my Twitter that I got going, that Derrick Henry with Corey Davis last week was a stack, even though no one wanted to play the Jets. Corey
Right.
Davis had a good game. So, you know, pick a guy that on the Jags to pair with Henry on your secondary correlation, and you kind of got something there Bobby was just talking about with going to that game. So
yeah, I really like Chenault and I really like Marvin Jones both. So I think I could even get behind potentially a Lawrence to both those guys. I think you're going to see more rushing upside from Lawrence as the season goes on too. Especially if any pass rushers ever, like if they're able to get to him more, and he's lost a receiver already down Shark. So I think that you're going to see a little bit of him scrambling a little more, which is obviously great for DFS. And you did mention Darnold, who there's going to be a point where I really want to play this guy. I'm not sure. This is not a bad spot, I don't think, but I just like the other guys around him better. And, you know, you can look at how consistent he's been. He's put up over 20 or 19.9 in every game so far this year. He put up 33 last week against Dallas. A lot of it in a comeback sense. And also he ran for 2 touchdowns, and you get the DJ Moore part of it. So I could get behind it. It's just, I just don't want to spread out too thin on this slate.
yeah, and I feel like I'm going to do that because I didn't even say Jalen Hurts yet. And he's been the top 12 fantasy quarterback, you know, and for fantasy wise, I mean, garbage time, he's still getting work. I mean, he's doing really well too. Jalen Hurts has been. He's not even have any design scrambles.
Mm-hmm.
He's also, you know, like a lot of his scrambles are coming because of team blitzes, and he's scrambling to get out of it. And you know, Panthers do a lot of blitzing, so I think he's going to have some scramble work this week. He leads the league with 19 scramble for yardage, so like he's getting fantasy points, guys, as well. So I mean, I think it's going to be a spread out week. There's a lot of options to go. Make sure you're doing good stacks, correlation, whichever direction you go, and really watch yourself on the ownership this week. But I think there's some good games we should be targeting.
Yep, absolutely agree. So let's talk about some running backs this week, because I see that Fournette's, I get it. Okay, he's cheap. You know, Leonard Fournette is 5,200. I still think you're looking at some potential vulture TDs like we got on the showdown time last week for Ronald Jones, who I was fortunate enough to have played in my caching lineup. But I really am going to take a weird angle on this. And they've been good against the run until last week. They've also had some very good matchups, but I want to play Miles Sanders. I think this is the way off the board play that no one's looking at. And on FanDuel partially, I guess he's probably going to have some ownership over there. Not much. He's 5,900. I understand things haven't broken out in a way for him to really go nuts yet this year. I think that this could be a very different situation, especially if Philly can grab an early lead and try and use him on the ground. He's also a guy who can catch passes out of the backfield and make things happen. And if I'm Philly, I'd be trying to get him involved heavily. So I actually think the only thing that worries me is, like we talk about with Zeke every week, it scares me with this Gainwell. They do like him. They like him in the passing game. So he's taken up a little bit of that Miles Sanders love. I don't know where I'll end up on DK with Sanders, but I did want to point out on FanDuel, especially at that 5,900 price, and it's a very, very fair price. Other guys I really like this week. I do like James Robinson, but I'm probably going to be a little bit less on it because of the ownership. I like DeAndre Swift, probably going to be below the ownership of there, probably going to be below on Saquon. I'm okay with all these guys. I like Najee Harris, probably be near the field on him. I kind of just want to be that every week with Najee right now, just because the workload is so crazy. I will be well under on Alvin Kamara. Until they stop doing the same exact thing where, what's his name? Taysom Hill. They should allow us to play Taysom Hill at running back just to be a little fun. The guy just it's a touchdown every game. 2 last week. Joe Mixon is a guy I want to be involved in because he's in my games, but I'm okay with going a little bit lower. Like I actually have some builds if I can get that value from either Tennessee or I want to play an Osborne or something like that. I like the Eckler and Henry. I don't think people are going to do that together. And I already mentioned Dalvin Cook, and I sort of like spending up at running back for those guys a little bit this week. I think Zeke is going to be low owned against the Giants, and that, people are going to play the passing game. Why not go back to Zeke again? That I'm definitely probably going to be over on. And then I like Nick Chubb in that game against the Chargers. I feel like he's just sort of had, things have just sort of haven't broken his way in terms of the scoring numbers the last couple of weeks. He's gotten plenty of work. 43 carries over the past 2 weeks. He doesn't get much work in the passing game, sure. But I could see him having a big game. And he's one of those guys, he breaks one big play and, he's getting 30 fantasy points the last couple of weeks instead of 15. He's just missing that one big play, basically. I also think if Gibson is healthy, but more importantly, I do like Chuba Hubbard, and I am going to take another shot there. I know we didn't get what we wanted out of him last week, but the work was there pretty much. And we've seen Philadelphia get beaten up on the ground a few times this year. So I want to be over on these guys. I mean, sounds real basic, but I want to be over on these guys who people aren't looking at as much. And I want to be under on some of the chalky guys who I like, but I don't think I need to pay a 22% on James Robinson. Even though I like the game, I don't think I need to play DeAndre Swift at, unless I'm game stacking that game. I don't think I need to play Saquon because everyone's going to do that. And then I'll stick with the passing game maybe for the Giants. I just think I want to get a little bit off the board. I don't want to play Kamara against this Washington defense when he's basically his touchdown equity has been non-existent. Has 0 rushing touchdowns on the season. He does have 2 receiving touchdowns this year, but it's a little worrisome, and he's not really a goal line back as it is anyway. So you're gonna get the Taysom Hill treatment if you do get down there. So I think there's a lot of guys you can go different directions on. I do think Damian Harris is kind of interesting, but I don't want to play the higher owned guys. So I'm going to be sticking. Most of my guys who I like the most are these Eckler, Zeke, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, who I mentioned. I think Josh Jacobs could be interesting if he's if he's fully ready to go, and I think he will be.
I actually like that call, that Jacobs.
Yeah, he's interesting, right?
Yeah, he caught passes on the showdown slate the other day. He coming off that injury where no one wanted to play him, and he was getting some passing work. Where the other running backs weren't getting nothing. They were in the game, but like Jacobs got passes and rushes. Like he didn't overall do good, but like if they bump up his workload a little bit, I mean, that guy could get some work. So
I totally agree. And he's at that right price range. I mean, everybody wants to play a cheap Leonard Fournette in a very volatile situation, in my opinion. I mean, they could just throw it all over him for one thing. And they also could use Ronald Jones as the goal line back in some cases, or you see another one where Fournette breaks a 12-yard play and they get down to the 2 and then they pull him out and they bring in Ronald Jones. I mean, we've seen it happen over and over again, both ways.
Yeah.
So if everybody's going to go that direction, I would be inclined to try and step a different direction myself. How about anybody else for running backs that I didn't mention or that you like especially?
No, I like the group you give out. I mean, that was a good group. You got some low owned guys there in Chubb, Dalvin Cook. If he's low owned, I think I'm gonna have a lot of him. Especially some of those guys are really popping. I do like Elliott too, like you said, but I think he might get some more ownership as the week goes on. So watch that into Saturday, guys. I'm just going to throw that little note out there. I think he's getting talked about a lot. I think he's going to get he's looked a little bit better these last couple of weeks. So I think people are getting back on that train. So
yep. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and I'll if Damian Williams really ends up 15% owned, I'll just pass on that one. There's some of these ones are a little surprising. All right, let's talk about receiver because I want to talk so I really like Shenault this week. And I like the Jacksonville receivers. I like the Cowboys receivers who are going to be very, very popular. I love Antonio Brown this week. I think that's a great price and he's going to have some ownership. I'll probably still be over the field on it. Also, he just torched Miami in the past and he had the little brief stint and everything going there. Anyway, it's just something else that I'd look out for. I do think Brady's going to look at him quite a bit here, and I don't think they're going to be able to do a lot to stop him actually, because I think that he's actually the best. I think he's the best option they have this week. Love Keenan Allen. These are the popular ones I like. I love Keenan Allen in that game. I really like the Cincinnati situation. We have to see what happens with Higgins, but everyone wants to play Chase. I'm very happy playing Boyd. He seems to be developing a rapport now with Joe Burrow. I really like the idea of paying up for Hopkins as a spend up, and I'm going to try and squeeze some value in because I like some of the stud running backs. So they did look. Don't just look at the target. I mean, they tried to run some specific plays that were designed to get Samuel the ball, catching it near the line of scrimmage, and then hoping he breaks one. Now, I don't know how heavy he's going to be involved this week, but I do want to take some shots on him, although I don't love the ownership. And then if we get the Cincinnati stuff, I have started to narrow down. I really pay attention to that game. The problem was they really spread it out to all the other receivers. Josh Reynolds initially looked like he was going to be the play. When they needed to come back, it was Westbrook, and then Watson caught the touchdown. I am probably going to filter through those guys if we lose Brown and Jones, but something tells me we're not going to. But if we were to, I'm going to take some shots on those cheapos as well, because I think there is upside against the Jacksonville defense that has bled a lot of points to wide receivers so far this season. And Devontae Adams is a great play. I know he's going to be high owned, but the guys I mentioned, you could pivot off with Jefferson and Hopkins, I think are probably my favorite pivots off of him. Who do you like in the passing game this week? I didn't mention Cortland Sutton, who I think is also a really good play. Who do you like in the passing game this week?
Ooh, there's some good options today. I know you got Justin Jefferson here at 7.7, 3.6% ownership. I like going there. I'll probably get some of that.
Mhm.
Really like that game we talked about, stacking it. You can even stack up the Burrow game as well with two pass catchers, Boyd and Chase, or Boyd and
Mhm.
Higgins coming back. Those guys are in the 5K range. They're very cheap guys to get in your stack, I think, and then run it back with Adams or run it back with Aaron Jones or something like that, guys, and then kind of get different elsewhere. I know, I didn't see Brown's price today till now, and I do like that 5.2 price. I've been high on Brown. I think he gets a lot of balls, so he's a
Mhm.
good PPR guy on DraftKings. He is a little bit higher owned. You do have Evans, you do have Godwin there, so it's really Brady spreads it out a lot. So you're really gonna have to hope he goes to Brown a lot. Maybe sprinkling in one of those guys might be a good idea, and just hoping you get the guy that goes off, or stack it up. Maybe try to get him. You can get Brown and Godwin together, even at 6.3 and 5.8 or 5.2. That's pretty cheap. So I mean, you can get stacks going. I
Let me
like
ask you
that.
real quick about your. Yeah, I like that. Everything you said. Let me ask you real quick about this. We've seen this before with your guy Rogers, that he'll spread it around and all that. Am I crazy for having interest in Cobb and a little bit of interest in Lazard this week? And yeah, you could say it's just results oriented because he had 2 touchdowns last week. But if he's going to look for him and they're going to produce down there by the goal line, Rogers will feed you the ball, and he has a good rapport with Cobb anyway. Lazard is always the guy who I keep hearing good things about and doesn't really ever quite get there for me, like in
Yeah, I
the
never
last
gets
couple
there for
years.
me either.
But I think they're both viable as well. And you could double stack. You could play Rogers in a double stack with him. You could play Burrow on the other side with 2 Cincinnati, and then use both these receivers and use your flex. I would think that's actually viable this week. What are your thoughts on these guys as cheap, whether part of a game stack or even maybe separately as some value for Cobb and Lazard?
Well, you got to think the ball's going to go somewhere else. But I mean, last week obviously went to Cobb, so he had a big game. But man, I don't like usually buying into stuff like that. I mean, we'll see the ownership. If it stays low, it's viable. These guys are both cheap. Rogers is chucking the ball. Cobb should run a lot of underneath routes a little bit. I mean, that's what he used to do, catch a lot of those balls and then run after catch. So I mean, I watch a lot of Packers games in my day, but Adams just gets so much because he gets those goal line 1-yard touchdowns. It's absolutely insane.
I know.
It's so hard to get off Adams and then maybe even go to Cobb and Lazard. I don't mind pairing Adams with one of these guys on a stack, or going to the tight end. Tanyan's been getting some work, but I don't mind it. I had a little bit of Lazard and Adams, or Lazard or Cobb and Adams. I don't mind that little in the Rogers stack, a little ownership to get different too.
Yeah, and just look at the prop. I mean, you have Cobb, who's projected to have 3.5 catches, 37. Well, that's what the over, and then 37.5 yards, and only plus 220 for a touchdown. That's not bad for a guy who's 4K, especially if you like the game stack, especially because he's not going to be owned. And I just think that's interesting. So I'm sort of into trying to mess around with some of these cheap value receivers. Of course, we're going to have to wait till the injury news breaks. Guys, tune in at 11:30 Eastern time, so we can go over everything with you then, because we'll have it obviously more clearly defined. This is, it's always hard to do the NFL shows because until Sunday morning, you don't really even know who's playing entirely, but this is where we're at for right now. Anybody else at wide receiver before we move over to tight end? I think you did a really good job of explaining some of the nice pivots at the top. I think the Jefferson thing I might get on, because I actually think you could play Jefferson and Cook in the same lineup. I mean, you could have Jefferson catch 2 touchdowns and have 150 yards in the first half, and then have Cook just wind out the second half and, running all over Detroit. We've seen that happen with some teams already with them. So
yeah, that gets expensive. But I mean, if you're playing like a Burrow and like a cheap one of your cheap Cincy game stacks with like a Lazard or something, you could easily do it, or something like that. So
yeah, exactly.
there's a lot of cheap stacks this week. I mean, you can get pretty cheap.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. And I think that allows you to spend up in a couple spots, which I'm definitely looking to do. So talking about tight ends, I love Kittle. First of all, I think he's a phenomenal play that probably should be a little higher owned. I am into Ingram. I understand other people are going to say, oh, but he's the obvious cheap guy. Well, I still am interested. I'm interested in Cook. I think all these guys are viable, but I really like the idea of playing Hawkinson. Hawkinson and Waller both. Waller's harder for me to get to because of my other spend ups. But Hawkinson, I've been able to build some with him so far. And I think that there's a really good case for him. I think that I honestly think that people are just sort of like a little too recency biased. I'm telling you guys, Jared Goff is going, and even in that recency bias, by the way, he had 8 targets last week. It's not like he didn't have a chance to have a game. and you get a Minnesota defense that hasn't exactly been pretty this season, I'll take a chance at a guy with that who could be the highest scoring tight end on the slate easily at 2.5% ownership. How about you in regards to Hawkinson? And then tell me some of your favorite tight ends.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's going to be a great run back too in that Minnesota stack. I love Hawkinson this week. I think especially low owned too. I like that game too in general. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I'm starting to come more onto that one as being an interesting game, especially. I mean, it just doesn't make sense exactly why the ownership would be quite as low, except for Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams are going to keep the ownership low on Dalvin Cook and both receivers for Minnesota. Simple as that, I think.
I mean, it looks like a lot of the tight end ownership's going back to Ingram here cheap, back to Cook here cheap because of his big game. I don't usually play into that like, hey, these guys had a big game, so let's.
I don't care at all about the big game. I'll attack Cleveland over the middle every single week. Every single week, they leave the middle wide open. Sorry.
Yeah, but you got Keenan Allen cheap in that game too.
Oh, I'm with you.
Which you talked about. I mean, I like Cook, but I mean, we called out the Parham play for the showdown this week. Yep, I mean, it was great. We had a touchdown from him, and everyone. I had a lineup sitting in second place. Moves up 2 points. It's a 60K chop with 7 guys. I got Parham in that lineup. So I just need a little bit more. But so we've been close. We've been making some good calls here. So definitely listen in on 11:30 for last minute calls on Sunday too.
And check out the Discord. I mean, we all try to do our parts. Rohde's done an incredible job, like helping people out and talking about just, ways you could construct lineups, the thought process, playing game scripts. It's really, really valuable. And it's still free right now, guys. So jump on in. I'll attach it to the video. But it's really good stuff. On that note, also, I will be doing every Tuesday right now, the plan is to do it at 5:30 Eastern going forward. I will be doing a little, just a coaching session, a Q&A thing for any of the members of True DFS. So we're going to set that up and we're going to do some Q&As just about general lineup building, maybe about that week's stuff. It'll transfer over to the NBA season, which, as you guys know, is sort of my specialty. It's definitely the sport I like the most and I'm the best at. It's going to be a lot of fun. So hopefully you guys can join us for that as well. All right. Any other tight ends to mention before we talk defenses?
It's going to be a tight pool. I use them in your stacks probably. I'm going to get a little Waller if you can. Maybe get a little more Kittle possible. And some of these guys in your stacks are run backs even for Hawkinson call that we like. So
absolutely. All right. Defense wise, obviously, our strategy. We're paying down on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I actually am starting to come around with some of the mismatches. Like I just was playing the Bills the last 2 weeks and I didn't even look at other defenses because it was too easy to get them in, And when a team's and then they put up 20 plus fantasy points both weeks, when you get that big of an outlier, like a standout kind of a game, and the pricing doesn't matter that much, you kind of want to go with it. I like a lot of the cheap defenses this week, so I have no problem with the Eagles or Washington, but I don't need to play the chalk cheap ones when I like some other ones. In the mid tier, if I did have the money for the mid tier, I do think that the Steelers are mildly interesting against Locke. And Cowboys against Daniel Jones. I know he hasn't been turning it over this season, but just historically, nobody turns the ball over more. I know he's gotten better. I'll give him credit, but that's where I'm at for that. I'm not probably going to be high on the Jaguars. I'll probably end up with a little bit of them because I'm going low. I might take some Texans, which feels kind of gross, but I'm looking for cheap defenses other than the main one. So the Texans and Lions both stand out to me as pivots off of Washington and the Eagles. How about for you?
Yeah, I definitely like that. I see it like if a lot of people are starting to pay down more for defense. I mean, if you guys want to get a different build, we talk a lot about in the Discord, you can kind of flip it a little bit, pay up a little bit more on DK2. Now already give you guys a different build what wise with the pay up. So one of them that sneaks in for me is probably the Chargers at 3.2. Baker has not looked very good.
Yep.
We do like Chubb in that game, but Baker could throw some pick sixes. I mean, that game is just. I like the Chargers stack. I like the Chargers in that. And their defenses actually look good. They did a little letdown on Monday night, but I think they can really put some pressure on Baker, get him sacked, and then throw it up for some turnovers. He's prone to throw it up, so maybe go there a little bit.
Yeah, I totally am. I'm with you on that. And by the way, speaking of mid-tier, I think the Vikings, as much as I just said, I like that game. And I like both sides of the defenses as well. We've seen Cousins turn the ball over plenty in the past. And we've seen Jared Goff have games where you almost needed to have the defense against him to cash because he'll throw 3 picks. I think he had 2 pick sixes and a fumble recovery once for a touchdown in the game. And I was just like, oh my God, you want to try and target guys who would kind of panic under any kind of defensive pressure. All right, let's do a quick sum up. We've got a meeting to get to in just a minute, but let's do a quick sum up. I think that everything's still the same for me. Basically we're seeing like we're on the same things, but I do think I want to get some more exposure to this Minnesota-Detroit situation. Always love targeting games in domes. I really like that the ownership you're getting here is just crazy across the board, pretty much for Minnesota. I mean, Justin Jefferson could be like, there is no reason why he doesn't have to outscore. Yeah, I mean, as great as Adams is, as much as I like Adams as the best, if you told me who you had to bet your life who's going to score the most fantasy points from receiver, I would say Adams. But Justin Jefferson, I mean, there is no reason it couldn't be this guy, and he's a 35 fantasy point game waiting to happen. So I've sort of come a little bit more on. I do like the Hawkinson run back at low ownership as well. I'm sort of coming back onto that Detroit Minnesota situation. That's the one thing that maybe changed since we started the show, because I think that we made some good points that sort of really are going to linger with me. How about for you? Anything else that you want to add in terms of stacks you like, or maybe something else that you hadn't thought about? You mentioned Antonio Brown, that you hadn't noticed his price, but anything else that you noticed?
Yeah, I'm really glad you're getting on that Minnesota game a little bit more. Jefferson at 3% is insane. Just because, I mean, he's got a touchdown he just showed every game. He's got 22 points the last 2 games, and he's coming in at 3%. He turns that into a 2 touchdown game, guys. He's like Bobby said, 35 points. I think Hawkinson's the clear number 1 guy for the Detroit. You can stack that game up. I love it. I think Green Bay, Cincy, I might get a little bit more on that game as we talked about it on this show. That has shootout potential, guys. I mean, yeah, you got Mixon and Aaron Jones, but you beat the Bengals by passing, guys, right now. And Rodgers is going to be chucking, and then if Rodgers is chucking, Burrow's going to be chucking. That game could have a bigger shootout than we think here. And I still like my man Jalen Hurts in that Philly game still. And one defense I didn't tell you is probably the Raiders. They were a little chalky, but you got Fields starting, getting sacked, throwing it up, young guy, target that a little bit. And then Kyler Murray, a little bit higher cost quarterback, get him in some stacks too. I kind of like going there with those.
I love that. I mean, just thinking right now, if we could build somehow, even if you're not targeting, you could do it without targeting the game. You could literally just play Thielen. I'm sorry, not Thielen. You could play Jefferson and Hopkins. Start a build like that. And that's just not going to be a combination anybody has. Nobody's going to have that combination. You know, you can play chalk the rest of the way. That's just you get 2 guys who are 4% or lower owned and who are going to be who are going to be 0% owned together. Yeah. And they could easily be the highest scoring players in the slate. All right, man. Well, great job as always. Don't forget to tune in, you guys, with us on Sunday morning at 11:30 Eastern time. It will be me and Rohde. I think we'll have sheets again this week, but it's been good stuff so far. I mean, we got onto a lot of things. You know, sometimes we're right, sometimes Rohde's right, but if you can find the right mix of which one of us, it seems to be the answer. I mean, if we could somehow have combined our Cordarrelle Patterson with some of the other stuff that we talked about, man, we could have been. Sheets was right there with the millionaire on FanDuel. He had a real shot at it. I didn't even know until yesterday or something. But he was like, he needed basically 8 more fantasy points from Devontae Adams and he wins it. Like I was like, oh, and Devontae Adams had 12. I mean, he was going to get 20 more often than he gets 12. Anyway, good luck to everybody out there. Rohde, great job. Thank you. And for the true DFS people, guys, let us know how you're doing. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll be in Discord, and hope we have a great week 5 and somebody wins $1 million. Let's go.